So developing a healthy, happy, vibrant young person requires skills, it requires intention, it requires focus and awareness on our part about what are the ways we can help. And that means every single one of us can contribute to that. Actually, I'll give you an example of a technique that I tried. I wasn't even sure what I was doing at the time. But I realized as I became more of a professional focusing on positive youth development that I actually was applying some positive youth development techniques. So I live in a very middle-class neighborhood in a small seaside town in Maine. My neighbors around me are a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds, and I realized that living across the street there was a single mom. She had 4 children, and 3 of them were actually doing very well. One had a father that came and visited, others had connections, but it was the son. There was one boy, and I'll call him Fred for anonymous purposes. So Fred was a very tall, lanky kid. He kind of towered over all of his classmates, and he was very shy. So every day when he walked to school, he would pass me as I was going out to load up my car to go to work, but he never looked at me. He never even paid attention to me and actually shuffled his feet and looked at the ground. And I realized that as a neighbor, if I were to apply some of these positive youth development techniques, maybe I should try something out. So one morning, Fred was walking to school with his head down, and I just said, "Hey, Fred, how you doing?" And he kind of looked up. He wasn't quite sure who was speaking to him, and then he realized it was me. It was his neighbor, a neighbor he probably never even recognized. And he kind of nodded his head and went on. The next day, I did the same thing, and the day after that. On weekends, when I was out tending my garden, I noticed that Fred would ride up and down the street on his bicycle. And one day he came out with a baseball uniform on and a mitt. So I stood up with my garden gloves on and kind of said, "Fred, so are you playing baseball today?" And he kind of had that surprised look again, but then started to say things to me, started to go, "Yeah." And then I would ask him another question, "So where are you playing?" And Fred would answer the question. So each time I went outside, I would start looking for Fred so that I could make sure I said something to let him know that I recognized him, that I knew his name, and I actually started to take an interest in some of the things he was doing. So incrementally, step by step, I started to build a relationship with this boy. It started with saying his name. Then it started with asking him some questions. And then one day, he came over to me. I was in the garden again, and he kind of stood by the fence and began a conversation on his own. And he started to talk to me. And he started to tell me about how much he loved to play baseball. He told me what position he played. And then he started to share a little bit about his struggle with school. And as a good neighbor, as someone focused on building a relationship, which is the fundamental tenet of positive youth development, I just listened. And we developed this wonderful rapport where now when he walked to school, he would make sure he looked in the driveway to see if I was there. One day I was struggling with a box I was trying to put in the trunk of the car, and he came over and he helped me. So to this day, Fred is now grown up. He's an adult. He has a girlfriend. He stops by and says hello to his mother. He still looks for me in the driveway. And when I see him across the street, I'll wave. And I know that he knows that I recognized him. And I hope that that helps.